Yeah, I started the recording.
Okay, sure. So I guess we can start now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to another session of the Network Seminar Series hosted by the Network Intelligence, the Center for Network Intelligence at RBCCPS. So today's talk is by Professor Lalita Vadlamani, and she will be giving a talk on maximally recoverable codes for distributed storage systems. A little bit about Professor. So Professor Lalita received her BE degree in Electronics and Communication Engineering from the Osmania University, Hyderabad in 2003, and ME and PhD degrees from IISc Bangalore. From May 2015, she is working as an assistant professor at IIIT Hyderabad, where she is affiliated to the Signal Processing and Communications Research Center. Prior to joining IIIT Hyderabad, she worked as a research intern at Microsoft Research Bangalore. Her research interests include coding for distributed storage and computing, index coding, polar codes, Reed-Muller codes, and coded blockchains. So before we move on to the talk, we would like to remind the audience to subscribe to our Google Groups for information on future talks. You can also visit our website for more details. I will just paste those links in the chat box after this. Finally, I would also request the audience to keep your microphones on silent for the duration of the talk. And for questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. And that's it. So over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Stanley, and thank you, Parimal, for the invitation. And thanks to all who have joined this talk. First of all, I would like to say please stay safe and healthy. Yeah. So my talk today is going to be on maximally recoverable codes for distributed storage systems. This is joint work with my students at IIIT Hyderabad, Siva Krishna and Aditya. Arvind, who has interned with me, I think in 2017, and Biranjit, who is now working at GEC Barton Hill. Yeah, so in the upfront, I want to tell that though it's a network seminar series, the connection with networks I'll make only in the first few slides, and then later we'll move on to the coding theory questions. So I would like to point out about a distributed storage system which uses MDS coding. So initially the way we will start these things is by saying replication, but I think now most of us understand MDS coding quite well. So that is the reason I have started off with MDS coding itself. So there is a distributed storage system in which there are nodes. In this figure I have shown 5 nodes, and there is a file which needs to be stored in these nodes. And the way it is stored is that the file is divided into parts, blocks. Okay, and the blocks have a certain size. It is spec based on some system considerations. For example, 64 MB. And some of this terminology, let's say I have borrowed from a system known as HDFS or Hadoop. Whereas there are other systems as well, like Ceph or Windows, Azure, and so on, and there will be equivalent numbers for of these in those systems as well. So the file is divided into, let's say, for example, 3 parts, A, B, C. These are the chunks, and it is MDS coded. So which means that the way it is stored is I have A, B, C, and then I generate these 2 linear combinations. A plus B plus C and A plus 2B plus 3C, where when I say this addition, etc., they are happening in a certain finite field. And how the operation takes place on, let's say, a 64 MB block is by a process known as striping. So which means that you operate at a close to byte level, because most of the finite fields work on, let's say, codes over size, finite field of size 256 or so, right? So in that case, you can assume very safely that these operations are though taking place at byte level. And these blocks are stored in different nodes. There is no point in, let's say, storing 2 blocks in one node, because a node by itself is a failure domain, and the reason for introducing this additional linear combinations is to add redundancy to the system. Right? And MDS codes are known to be very much storage efficient. Okay. So this is about high level system overview which you have to have in mind. But then if I talk about different codes which in this talk, then what happens is instead of the MDS code, you have to equivalently think of some other code which I am talking about. So in the storage systems, node is considered as a failure domain, as I mentioned, and the failures are treated as erasures. So which means you know which node has failed, okay, as opposed to, let's say, errors let's say in channel coding, there is this error model. So which means that you don't know which of the bits or the symbols were in error. Whereas in the storage systems, the failure model is erasures, which means you know which node is unavailable or failed, right? So that's why we'll be talking about erasures throughout this talk. And as I have said, each encoded block is placed in a different failure domain. And the purpose of redundancy itself is to take care of two types of failures. One is called permanent failures, so which means that there's a hardware failure, a disk has crashed or so, which means that the data is lost. Okay, there are certain parameters of the code which are meant for taking care of these permanent failures. Okay? For example, the overall minimum distance of the code is something which is designed so that it is, it can handle some number of permanent failures. And on the other hand, there are also temporary failures which can happen in a storage system, like power outage, software upgrade, etc. So where the data is not lost, but it is temporarily unavailable whenever a client requires, asks for it, right? So in this case, it is not so much of a daemon kind of a parameter, minimum distance kind of a parameter, some other parameter which will define in the next few slides, let's say, right? So the temporary failures, to account for that, there is a different parameter of the code which is taken into account. Okay. And here I would like to quickly mention, because this is only, I'm going to mention it very quickly, but then as and when I define the code, I will also tell in detail why that topology is there. So I will be talking about three topologies of codes. Okay. So one is called codes with locality, and the second is codes with hierarchical locality. Mostly codes with locality and hierarchical locality will be dealing with simultaneously, okay, because the principles are the same, and both these codes are designed for independent failures. Okay. And in the last part of the talk, I will talk about another topology which is known as product topology, where correlated failures are handled better. Okay. And depending on what you want to use the code for, right, you can choose one of these topologies of the code, right? So what exactly are these topologies and all? I will define them precisely. So first we will see codes with locality and hierarchical locality. Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned about MDS coding, but there is a certain disadvantage of MDS coding when it comes to temporary failures. Okay. And in many cases, these temporary failures are single node failures, and it was studied that by observation that 97% of the failures are typically single node failures. Okay. In which case, suppose if you want to quickly reconstruct that particular block, right, then MDS codes are not so efficient. The reason is, so here I show a 1410 MDS code where 10 blocks of data are encoded into 14 code blocks, right? And let's say one is lost. Only one of the block is lost, which is 1. Even in this case, you have to contact 10 other nodes, okay, which is a lot. Okay, and in fact, you have to reconstruct all the 10, and then as part of it, you get the 1. That's why single node repair is not so efficient with this MDS codes. So I will just give a quick example of a code which is known as the locally recoverable code or code with locality. So very short form for this code with locality is LRC, which is locally recoverable or repairable code. Okay. So in which case the code is obtained by just modifying the previous MDS code in a certain way. There are still these 10 data blocks and the 4 parity blocks, but then one of the parities is split into 2 parities, P11 and P12. Okay, so where P11 is a function only of the first 5 blocks, and P12 is a function of the next 5 blocks. Okay, so in this case, suppose if one is lost, right? So then one dash can be recovered by just contacting 5 other nodes. Okay, and that is the reason these two parities P11 and P12 are known as local parities, and the ones P2, P3, P4 are known as global parities. Okay, and we can clearly see this is more efficient in terms of repair when there are single node failures. Okay, so when there are a whole bunch of failures, I think it will be just as complex as, let's say, Reed-Solomon, the MDS code itself. But then if there is just one node failure, then the repair is much faster because we are contacting much less number of nodes. Okay, so to formalize this notion of repair locality, there is a parameter which is introduced in this paper. I have used short forms here, but I'll just say Gopalan et al. Okay, which is called locality parameter. So for a linear code, we know parameters n, k, d min. Okay, these are pretty, quite well-known parameters. But then there is another parameter called locality, which is introduced, where a code symbol is said to have locality R if you can contact at most R other symbols, okay, and recover this code symbol CI. And if we are able to do this for all, let's say, so every code can be written in systematic form. So if we are able to do this for all the information symbols, for example, then it's called a code with information locality. But for this talk, we'll be talking about codes with all symbol locality, which means that every symbol has this property. Every symbol can be recovered by contacting at most R other symbols. Okay, so we'll be, in the rest of the talk, we'll be dealing with all symbol locality. Okay. There is a trade-off which Gopalan et al. Have come up with, which is very nice, which says that if you have this additional condition that there has to be information locality R, okay, only information locality R, then you pay a price in terms of the minimum distance that you can achieve. Okay. If there were no locality, then we know that d min is upper bounded by the singleton bound, which is n minus k plus 1. Whereas if you introduce this additional locality parameter R, then you pay a penalty for introducing that. Okay, so which means that you can go only up to a certain minimum distance, which is less than what you could have otherwise achieved. Okay, and this is sometimes called singleton-like bound. Okay. So I want to talk about LRC topology. Okay. So the previous thing that I have showed you, there are codes which achieve this with equality. Okay. But then, trying to, after understanding some properties of the code which are optimal, let's say, there is LRC topology, which is, let's say, introduced. And I'll call it LRC topology here. Maybe you will not find this exact terminology in any paper, let's say. But then the way it is that, let's say I have a code of length 15, okay, and I have a locality of R, okay, which is 4. So which means that any symbol I'll be able to correct by contacting at most 4 other symbols. But then each one of these here is called a local group, okay. So this D1, D2, D3, D4, Q1 is called a local group, which is disjoint in itself. So which means that this Q1 is the sum of, some linear combination of this D1 to D4, okay. And that set of local parities is disjoint from the other local parities which are there below, let's say, right? So if you look at, so this Q1, Q2, Q3 are the local parities and the P1, P2 are the global parities. So the way to think about this local and global parities are that local parities will be, linear combinations of subsets of symbols, whereas global parities are sums of all the symbols, okay? So the brown ones are indicated as global parities and these blue ones are local parities, and this is an all symbol locality code. Okay. So if you look at the parity check matrix for this, then there will be 3 disjoint parities. Okay. So which is indicated by, just indicated by a line. So what do I mean by it? I have coordinates 1 to n of the code. So there are 15 coordinates. But then 1 dash just represents that there is a parity whose support is contained only in that 5 positions. Okay. And similarly, there is a second parity whose support is contained only from, let's say, 6 to 10. And the third parity which has a support from 11 to 15. Okay. And when I say LRC topology, I mean this structure of the parity check matrix. Okay. So which means that, I mean, when I say a code has, let's say, LRC topology, what I mean is for certain parameters means you have to, of course, even when I say this, there is this 1 to 5, which is coming because of some, reason of this R, H, and so on, right? So these are the local parities, and that is what I mean by LRC topology. Okay. So fine. So the reason I'm explicitly specifying this LRC topology is because codes which actually achieve this bound with equality need not have disjoint parities. Okay. They will have there are constructions which have disjoint parities, they are there, but they need not have also. Okay. So that is the reason I'm explicitly defining this topology. Right. Okay. So code is said to have LRC topology if it has a parity check matrix which has some local parities like this. Okay, what exactly you fill in there, what finite field symbols you fill in there, that is immaterial. Okay, so that is LRC topology. Now I want to go to talk about codes with hierarchical locality and their topology. Okay, so just a quick motivation for what are these codes with hierarchical locality. In the codes with locality, all LRCs that we have seen, okay, as here I have shown a case where I am adding one local parity, for example, but you can always add more local parities here, and that is this parameter delta. Okay, so delta is the number of local parities that you are adding. Okay, so and what happens is that once you cross this delta number of erasures, okay, so you have locality as long as you are within this delta erasures, but then the moment you cross it, then you have to again contact, like in the MDS code, you have to contact at least k symbols. Okay, so the idea of hierarchical locality says that why can't we degrade it slightly progressively? Okay, so which means that if I have more erasures, right, than this delta, then maybe I don't want to contact all k, but some intermediate number. It's not r, it's not k, some intermediate number. Okay, and that is what is the idea of hierarchical locality. Okay, so here if I say, so that is the reason in hierarchical locality I'll have two sets of locality parameters. One is R1, R2, and the other is H2 delta, if you want to call it. Okay, and typically this H1 is the number of global parities that you add. Okay, so just we can understand the hierarchical locality just by an example. I'm not going to formally define it because I think it will just get into too much notation. Okay, so here there are these 24 code symbols, all of which satisfy 3 global parities. Okay, so which means that there are parities which involve all of these 24 symbols potentially, and there are 3 of them. Okay, then I'm going to talk about what is known as a mid-level code and then a local code. Okay, because I said it is hierarchical, there are 2 levels of codes here. Okay, so in a mid-level code there are 8 symbols. Okay, C1 to C8, and similarly C8 to C9 to C16 will form another mid-level code, and similarly C7 to C17 to C24. Okay, so this mid-level code has a dimension of I think 4. Okay, and has 4 okay, it has a H2 of 2. Okay, fine. So this mid-level code by itself is an LRC. Okay, so it is not an MDS code or anything like that. So this R1 is kind of giving you the dimension of the mid-level code. Okay, and H2 is kind of giving you what are the number of global parities here. Okay, the rest will be local parities. Okay, so I have a mid-level code, which means that so maybe I will just slightly switch. So I will go to the local code first and come back to the mid-level code also. And the local code consists of these 4 symbols: C1, C2, C3, C4. Okay, and here R2 is equal to 3. Okay, so which means that I have a locality of 3. Okay, and a delta of 1. So which means within this local code I can tolerate 1 erasure. Right? So if you go back and see, suppose if I have 2 erasures within that, okay, then how many symbols should I be will I be connecting to? It is not the dimension of the code, which is k equal to 9, but then I'll be connecting to 3 symbols. Okay, sorry, wait a minute. I'll be connecting to 4 symbols. Okay, so 4 symbols within this, of course, may be carefully picked, but I'll be connecting to them to be able to recover 2 erasures within this code. Okay, and if there are, let's say, 3 or more, then maybe I have to go back to my, connecting to all 9 of them somehow carefully chosen, and being able to recover the symbols. Okay, so that's why it's called hierarchical locality. Okay, and just to specify the topology from this, right? So it looks like this. So earlier, when I was saying LRC topology, there were local parities. Okay? There is this support of the code. There is a parity check matrix whose columns are going from 1 to n, and I have all of them just filled with these local parities. But then when I say hierarchical LRC topology, then I have some set of local parities. How many of them? Each group of here there has delta local parities. Yeah, and similarly another group will have delta local parities. But then in addition, there will be mid-level parities also whose support is like spanning across local parities. Okay, and here if you see, it is spanning these 2 local parities. And how many of them are there? There are H2 of them. Okay, so there are delta local parities, there are H2 mid-level parities each. Okay, and then there are some global parities. I will not write global parities as part of the topology because they are, they're not giving any additional condition. It's just saying your parity could be, support could be all the n symbols. Okay, that's the reason I won't include global parities as part of the topology. Okay, so this is LRC and hierarchical LRC topologies. Okay, let me see how I'm doing in terms of time. Yeah, okay. So what are maximally recoverable codes? So maximally recoverable codes can be defined for any topology. Here in this particular case, I'm showing what they, what are the kind of erasures they can correct for LRC topology. Okay? But what is a maximally recoverable code is that it is a code which can correct from all possible erasure patterns which are information theoretically recoverable. So this information theoretically recoverable is a slightly vague term. Okay, in the sense maybe it's not clear what it means, but what it means is that, so when I showed you LRC topology or hierarchical LRC topology, I just showed you, what are the supports of these parities, right? So suppose you fill in some number, some field elements there, and you are able to correct some erasure pattern, okay, by carefully selecting those field elements. Okay, that erasure pattern, every such erasure pattern has to be corrected by this MRC. Okay, so what it means is that MRC corrects all possible erasure patterns which could be corrected by any code which has that topology. Okay, so that's why they are very, very, very much tied to the topology that you choose. Okay, so here I'm just going to show 2 erasure patterns. So what is meant by erasure pattern is recoverable. Okay, so here I'm showing 2 erasure patterns for the code that we have discussed before. Okay, so the first one can be corrected. The reason is there are 5 equations and 5 unknowns. So when I say 5 unknowns, there are 5 information symbols which are erased. Okay, and there are 5 equations given by this local parities and global parities. Okay? And all of them have one of those 5 which is erased. So that is why all of them are useful in recovering these 5 unknowns. Okay, so this is one erasure pattern which is, of course, information theoretically recoverable. Okay, whereas if you see the erasure pattern on the right, okay, so here also there are 5 erasures, but then all of them are in the first 2 local groups. Okay, so which means that somehow this local parity Q3 will not be useful in recovering any of these D1, D2, D3, D6, D8, right? So because Q3 is just a function of these. So that is the reason effectively I have only 4 equations and 5 unknowns. Okay, which means that I will not be able to recover this using any code. Okay, so one important thing in LRCs, so this MRC, maximally recoverable codes. So I'll be from now on talking about maximally recoverable codes. The questions of interest are as follows. For any given topology, you want to characterize all possible erasure patterns which are correctable, or I mean, in the previous slide, I said information theoretically recoverable. Okay. So for a given topology, you want to characterize that. The reason being that once you characterize it, then I mean, one way of these code constructions, when you know the supports but you actually don't know what is the field to operate on and so on, is that you kind of fill in variables there, okay, and then somehow argue that you can go to a high enough field and show the existence of a code, right? So the moment you kind of identify these correctable erasure patterns, it's like existence of the code is kind of given. Okay? It involves only filling the parity check matrix with variables and arguing using some multivariate polynomial kind of arguments. It's actually called Schwartz-Zippel lemma. I'll not go into details, but then some such arguments to show that there exists a code, okay, which will correct all these erasure patterns. That is an easy thing. So, but even characterizing this correctable erasure patterns, we have to do it carefully. Okay. The second one is explicit constructions for these MRCs. Okay. First, of course, we will target only explicit constructions. Then we will try to go over low field sizes as well. Okay. And the third is lower bounds on the field size of MRC for a given topology. Okay. We will see first two problems in this. I think I'll not have time for the third one. I did not include also. So lower bounds we will not see in the as part of this talk. We will just see correctable erasure patterns and explicit constructions of MRCs. Okay. So for LRC topology, what are the correctable erasures? Okay. So I'm going to describe it in a certain way. I have these local groups. In this case, I have 3 local groups. Okay. I am going to puncture this code in one location each. Okay. It could be arbitrary location. I could puncture the first local group in any one of the locations. Okay. But I will do it on arbitrary locations. Okay. So after I puncture, then I have a code of length 12. Now I have a code of length 15. I have a code of length 12. Right. And that code of length 12 should be an MDS code of dimension 10. Okay. So this, I mean, I'm saying that this description characterizes all possible erasures of LRC topology. Okay. Because whatever erasures you want to do, actually you are doing it in 2 steps. Okay. One is by puncturing the local codes in certain locations. So that is giving you your first level of erasures. Okay. And then by saying that the resultant code is MDS, okay, every MDS code by itself can tolerate H erasures. Okay. So after puncturing 1, 1, 1, the H is equal to 2. So which means I can have 2 erasures anywhere in the punctured code. Okay. So those are all one set of erasures which can be corrected. But then I'll get a whole lot of it if I pick this, where I'm puncturing arbitrarily. Okay. So this kind of completely characterizes the correctable erasures for LRC topology. Okay. It can be proved. I mean, all these things can be proved. So that is, I'm not going to go to the proofs, but I'm just describing what are correctable erasure patterns for LRC topology. Okay. So similarly, if I go to hierarchical LRC topology, okay. So what you do is that you puncture delta symbols from each local code. Here, I mean, in the previous case, delta was equal to 1. Okay. You puncture delta symbols from each local code. Okay. And then in addition, you puncture H2 symbols from each mid-level code. Okay. You do this puncturing and you can pick your delta symbols from the local code and in addition the H2 symbols arbitrarily from the mid-level codes. Whatever the resultant code is there, that has to be again an MDS code with these parameters k plus H1 comma k. Okay. So this again kind of characterizes all possible erasure patterns which can be corrected for hierarchical local code. I mean hierarchical LRC topology. Okay. So in the previous slide and here we have completely characterized what are correctable erasure patterns for LRC and hierarchical LRC topology. Okay. So we go to the next question, which is constructions. Okay. So here I give a summary of MRC constructions. And this one, I wanted to make it slightly, general. So that is the reason I have given a whole lot of constructions just to kind of, it's a gamut of constructions. Just to see what kind of ideas are used in constructing maximally recoverable codes. Okay. So I have this codes with locality or hierarchical locality. So the whole diagram applies to both the topologies. Okay. They can be constructed using parity check matrix approach or a generator matrix approach. Okay. In parity check matrix approach also there are two ways. One is based on linearized polynomials and second is based on skew polynomials. Okay, this I'm not going to touch. The green ones are the ones which I am going to describe in this talk. Okay, and in the generator matrix approach, the first one is based on what are known as Gabudelian codes, and the second one are based on linearized Reed-Solomon codes. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to first start with the parity check matrix approach for constructing codes with locality and hierarchical. Okay, so there I will describe for both. Generator matrix approach, I wanted to do it because there are some nice interesting new coding ideas there. Okay, so parity check matrix approach. Here a quick summary of things which are needed from, let's say, finite field theory. Okay, so I have a finite field FQ, and FQ per M is an extension field of that, and it's very well known. FQM is a vector space over FQ of dimension M, right? And this particular linearity kind of property is true. Okay, when you pick lambdas, so I am taking a FQ linear combination of these two elements theta 1 and theta 2, which are some general elements in FQM, and lambda 1 lambda 2 belong to FQ. Okay, when I take this linear combination and raise it to the power q to the I, okay, because these lambdas themselves are from FQ, okay, they don't have these powers. Okay, so it's a linear combination of theta 1 q to the I and theta 2 q to the I. Okay, this is one thing which we will use in the construction. Okay, and the second thing which maybe we will not directly use, but at some point yes we will, is that, so consider an ordered basis A1 to AM of FQ to the M over FQ. Okay, then we can talk about a matrix representation map of vectors over FQM as follows. Okay, so because I'm expanding any element in this ordered basis, okay, and the elements themselves are coming from the finite field itself, right? So then I have a FQ linear combinations of these AIs. Okay, and Ci itself is a vector, so that is the reason if I have a Ci vector of some length S, then it can also be represented as a matrix of size m times S, where each one of these elements is taking values from FQ. Okay. In particular, suppose if S equal to 1, if there is any element in FQM, I can always think of it as a vector of length m over FQ. That I can say. Okay. So this is a finite field theory. Very, very quick thing about it, which we'll be using in the next few slides. Okay. Yeah. So a set is said to be k-wise independent. So I can talk about linear independence over FQ because FQ to the M is a vector space, and any subset I can talk about independence over FQ, right? So it is said to be k-wise independent. If I take any subset of S of size k, at most k, it is linearly independent over FQ. Okay, so it's only it comes in the next lemma anyway. So let's just look at that. FQM is an extension of FQ, and alpha 1 to alpha n are the elements of that. Then this particular matrix, which I think sometimes it's called Moore matrix, okay, which has its n elements, and then every other row is raised to the power q. The next row is raised to the power q square, and so on. So it is like what you can think of is, it's called Q analog of, let's say, Van der Waals matrix. Van der Waals matrices are well known. They have increasing powers. Here they have increasing Q powers. Okay. So this particular matrix generates a n, k MDS code if and only if these elements are k-wise linearly independent over FQ. Okay. So which means that you take any k of them and then it is linearly independent over FQ. So here, you should see that these are elements over FQ power M, and I'm talking about K-wise linear independence over FQ. The K-wise independence I've just defined in the previous definition. Okay. Okay, so now the construction of local MRC. Okay. So when I said local MRC, the correctable erasure patterns, I have punctured some coordinates and said that some resultant code is MDS, right? So, but we are going to look at it from a parity check matrix point of view, in which case puncturing a code is equivalent to shortening of the dual code. Okay, and shortening a dual code means that I am taking the parity check matrix and I am going to row reduce it to make some of the coordinates 0. So wherever I have punctured in the code, those corresponding coordinates I'll try and make them 0 in the shortened, in the parity check matrix, and that is same as your puncturing operation. Okay, so here I'm alluding to two facts. One is that puncturing a code is equivalent to shortening the dual code, and shortening in the parity check matrix is equal to row reducing so that you make some of the coordinates 0. Okay. So now here I am looking at a parity check matrix of a certain topology. It has two local groups and it has just one parity, let's say, right? So I want to, let's say, puncture on 1 and R plus 2. So what you do is that I row reduce the global parities below, but then actually here if you see, it's not just the topology, I have given the code construction completely in terms of the parity check matrix. The rows below are the matrix which we have seen before. Okay, and this I am saying it is going to be a local MRC if these alphas satisfy some conditions, and we are going to get to those conditions. What are the conditions that alphas have to satisfy? Okay, so for that we have to row reduce. So let's say I'm puncturing on 1 and R plus 2, and I'm going to make those columns zeros. And the way I'm going to do it is by using, by just multiplying the first row by alpha minus alpha 1, and then adding to the every row below of the global parities, and similarly minus alpha R plus 2 times the row 2, and then add it to every row of this. Okay. Once you do this, the resultant matrix looks like this. Okay. Here if you see, it is equivalent to puncturing in this 1 and R plus 2. The reason being I have removed these two. They are completely 0. Okay. Shortening just means that those coordinates are, every code word in that is zeros. Okay. So now here if you look at the resultant matrix, ignoring the zeros, the rest has to be the parity check matrix of an MDS code. Okay. But then when is this, parity check matrix of an MDS code? I think previously I have said it is generator, but the same lemma actually applies even to parity check matrix too. Okay. It is that of an MDS code. If each one of these alphas that you are seeing here, the subtractions, right, they are H-wise linearly independent over FQ because there are H rows here. Okay. So all these linear combinations that you are having, all of them have to be H-wise linear independent over FQ. Okay. But again, this puncturing I have just showed with 2 of the coordinates. I can pick 2 arbitrary coordinates to puncture. Okay. So which means I'll get a whole lot of alpha I minus alpha j's, which I have written explicitly here. And all of them have to be H-wise linearly independent over FQ. Okay. So now how do I pick, it's again restating the condition, how do I pick these elements? Okay. So before that, how do I generalize to delta local parities? Is that previously I was having 2 rows. Okay. So now I have delta rows, let's say, and delta other rows, and I can have arbitrary number of local groups. Here I'm just saying M is a Vandermonde matrix of size delta by R plus delta, and you are going to take delta of them, delta columns there, and you're going to call it MS. Okay. Please ignore the I here, and the rest you are going to call it MS bar. Okay. And you are going to use this MS to be able to row reduce everything below it. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the previous slide, I got a little bit lost at the bottom. So your this parity check matrix, H-wise independence, it's only separately in each section or overall?
It is overall. It is overall. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to do the row reduction here again. Okay. And the way row reduction is done is by, multiplying with this L kind of a matrix and adding it appropriately. Okay. So everything below MS has become 0, which is delta columns. Okay. And MS bar is going to look like this. But the only catch here, and actually even in my previous slide, is that so whatever coefficients are used for row reducing, okay, are something like MS inverse, okay, and in the previous case it was just -1, okay. These elements are going to be from FQ. Alphas themselves are going to be from FQM, but these elements are going to be from FQ, which means we can safely push them inside Q powers, okay, because of the linearity property that we have seen before, okay. So that's what happens here too, is that ideally L should have been outside, okay, when I do the row operations, but then I have pushed L inside just because the elements of L are from FQ, okay. And so now this operation I have shown for one local code. You concatenate all of them, and as Professor Vijay Kumar asked, the H elements here I have, I think I should use a better notation here, but you concatenate all of them, and then any H elements have to be linearly independent over FQ, so that resultant concatenated thing is an MDS code. I mean, is a generator matrix of an MDS code. Okay. So, but to get back to the condition on alphas, okay, if you see here, okay, each one of these linear combinations themselves can have at most delta plus 1 elements, because L itself is a delta by delta matrix. Okay. So it can have at most delta plus 1 alphas in the sum. Okay. So when we want each of these sums to be linearly independent, then it suffices. It's just a sufficient condition. It is not necessary. It suffices to pick these alphas as delta plus 1 times H wise linearly independent over FQ. Okay. Because when you look at H of them, at most there will be delta plus 1 times H of different alphas when you are picking them. Okay. So that is the reason these things have to be picked delta plus 1 times H wise linearly independent. Okay. So this is generalization to local parities. So now okay. Yes. So how do I pick these alphas? Picking these alphas is also a very interesting thing. So, so consider an NK D-min code over FQ. Okay. Columns of the parity check matrix of a code are D-min minus 1 wise independent. Okay. This is one property which we kind of study in coding theory, but then it is not maybe written in this form. Okay. All that it says is that any D-min minus 1 columns of the parity check matrix of a code are linearly independent. Okay. So now the thing is, whatever that delta plus 1 times H wise independence we want, we'll map it to this D-min minus 1. Okay. So the way we are going to construct these alphas is that we'll pick a parity check matrix. Okay. Look at the columns of it, but somehow collapse them to a higher field element. Okay. Because one thing which you should keep in mind is that vectors to higher field elements and extension field elements to vectors we should be able to do. So now whatever columns are there, we want to collapse it and call it a higher field element. But where is that? What is the field element there? Is that it is FQ to the n minus k. Okay, because when I take an n comma k comma d min code, the length of the vector in a column of parity check matrix, the length of the vector is n minus k. Okay. So that column can be interpreted as an element in FQ to the n minus k. Okay. So the way you pick the previous, delta plus 1 times H wise linear independence is by, mapping that number to D-min, okay, picking a suitable code, okay, and then interpreting them as field elements, which is, okay, so this n minus k should be q to the n minus k. It's not on the top. Okay, I'll change that. It is fq to the n minus k. But then in this whole process, there is some optimization which is involved. Is that how do you find for a given d-min x and maybe n, right? How do you pick a code which has least n minus k? Okay, and I mean, just by, let's say, encyclopedia of coding theory, people generally pick BCH codes such that this n minus k is minimized. Okay, so that is about constructing the MRCs. Okay. So very quickly about hierarchical local MRCs. I mean, this is our work, and we have an archive paper. As I have told that the topology itself, I'm going to fill in a certain way. Okay, so now I have mid-level parities and I have some global parities too. Okay, so the way I pick them is that now I have two field extensions. Earlier I was talking about FQ and FQ to the M. Now I am talking about FQ, FQ to the M1 and FQ to the M. Each one is an extension of the other. Okay, and if you see, the local parities will pick from the base field, the mid-level parities will pick from the intermediate field, and the global parities we are going to pick from the highest extension field. Okay, so that is how these things are picked, but then I still have to determine what are these M, M1, etc. Okay, so I'll just give the construction idea because it will follow along similar lines of what I have described before. Okay, as I have said, in the hierarchical local MRC, I'm going to puncture in delta coordinates, okay, in each local code, and in the mid-level code, in addition, I'll puncture H2 coordinates, okay, and the resultant code has to be an MDS code, right? So we have seen how to puncture the local coordinates in the previous thing. So in addition, what we have to do is H2 mid-level parities which we have to puncture. We have to do another row reduction for that. Okay, and in order for that another row reduction to work, okay, and finally for us to get an MDS code which is consisting only of these lambdas or the linear combination of lambdas, right, it is necessary that these things are raised to the Q to the M1, okay, where you are picking these alphas, right? So that is the connection. So so that whatever linear combinations you do, that get absorbed in a similar way in the lambdas also. Okay, so those are the, again, high level ideas. It is, I mean, I can go into the details, but then I think the ideas are more important. Okay, so that is how we construct hierarchical local MRCs, and they correct all possible erasure patterns which we have claimed they have to be correcting. Only thing, again, we have to pick these independence properties of alpha ij's and lambda ijk's in a careful way. Okay, so we have to see any alpha, how many terms is it adding, and similarly any lambda, once you row reduce, how many lambdas are getting added. Okay, and then suppose if you want some H1 is independence of those linear combinations, then it translates to a much larger linear independence in terms of the original lambdas itself. Okay, and then there will be two levels of the BCH code. Okay, so this is construction of hierarchical local MRC. Okay, so I will go through the generator matrix approach, and maybe after that, in the interest of time, I'll just state four product topologies very quickly. Okay, so in the generator matrix approach, so this is work done by, I think, one is Ozan Koiloglu, and so that is the first approach, and the second one by Dr. Professor Frank Shishang and Martinez. Yeah, so I mean the constructions itself are simple, but then there are some nice ideas. So one is based on the first generator matrix based approach is based on Gabrielian codes. Okay, so where you're going to pick some message symbols. Wait a minute, do I have a better thing here? Okay, yeah. So what is meant by a Gabrielian code is that I'm going to take some message symbols, okay, and I'm going to form a linearized polynomial from this. Okay, the coefficients are going to be message symbols, but then this polynomial itself is a linearized polynomial because I'm not taking all consecutive powers of x, but then I'm taking only consecutive q powers of x. Okay, and then I'm going to evaluate this at theta 1 to theta 12, all of which are linearly independent over some base field fq. Okay, these messages and thetas themselves all are coming from this extension field. Okay, but then what do you say, this theta 1 to theta 12 are going to be linearly independent over fq. Okay, as you can see, this actually is much more stringent than the previous k-wise independence that we have seen. Okay, so that way a Gabrielian code is an MDS code. That is kind of clear. If you write the generator matrix, it will look like the matrix that I have shown before. Okay, but then it is actually even more. It is more than an MDS code. And what is it? Is known as rank metric, and it is maximum rank distance code. Okay. I mean, this maybe doesn't have too much to do with the code construction itself. It might be useful in proving the properties, but I think it is useful to know that these Gabrielian codes are maximum rank distance codes, which means that they achieve singleton bound, okay, with respect to rank metric. So what are MDS codes or Reed-Solomon codes? They achieve singleton bound with respect to Hamming metric. These maximum rank distance codes achieve a singleton bound with respect to rank metric. Okay, and how is rank defined? So remember, I take a code word which is generated like in the previous case, but then I look at the matrix interpretation of it. Okay, remember we have done this matrix representation, and then you look at the rank of that matrix. Okay, that is, let's say, a rank associated with the code word. But then what is rank distance? I have two code words, let's say B and C. I take their difference and look at the rank of the matrix representation of the difference. So that is called rank distance. Okay. And Gabrielian codes being, maximum rank distance codes, they're actually, I think, useful in network coding and so on. Okay, those particular properties. Okay. Yeah. So how are MRCs constructed from these? Is I take the message symbols, whatever is the K of the message symbols. Okay. And then I'm going to use a certain Gabrielian code to be able to get, a whole lot of code symbols. Okay, and how many of them exactly? It will be the number of local codes times R. Okay, so this G, if you want to call it, it is the number of local codes that you want to have in the code. Okay, yeah, so G times R is not N per se, but then yeah, so it is the number of local codes times the locality parameter, comma K. And because it's an MDS code, the minimum distance is this much. So I use this Gabrielian code to generate these code symbols and simply split them, okay, depending on the R parameter. So in this particular case, R parameter is 4, okay. So I am just dividing into groups of 4, okay, and adding one local parity. In general, what you do, we divide them into chunks of R, okay, and then for every R, add some delta parities. So that's what is done for constructing a local MRC using Gabrielian codes. And this can be shown that it will correct all possible erasure patterns which we were talking about before. Okay, this is a generator matrix approach. The reason is we are not looking at the parities. Okay, so we are kind of designing the generator matrix of the code in some way, right? So this is actually somewhat old result. Okay, but then the more recent results in this is that there are a set of codes known as linearized Reed-Solomon code which have been proposed. Okay, I will maybe, in the interest of time, maybe not go through exactly what's going on here, but if you look at what is this matrix DI, right, it looks like as if, it's a van der Waals matrix kind of thing. Okay, but the only thing is the way it is van der Waals is in this particular operator which is defined before. Okay, so I have beta 1s, beta 1 to beta Ri, which you can kind of think as if it is d power 0 of this beta 1 to beta Ri. Okay, but then I have d of this beta 1 to beta Ri, and then it goes on up to dk to the k minus 1 of beta 1 to beta Ri. Okay, so this particular matrix is kind of building block to building this linearized Reed-Solomon codes. Okay. Now what is done is that, some of these, okay, so there are some things which need to be understood here, that these betas are going to be basis elements, okay, and there is a gamma which is the primitive element of this. So, this basis, primitive elements and all these things we understand. There is something which is happening in the operator itself, okay, which gives a nice matrix which we have not seen before. Okay, it's not van der Waals matrix, it's not even the Q power matrix that we know. It will be some different matrix, okay. Now what we do is that we concatenate some number of these, and this is known as a linearized Reed-Solomon code. Okay, the reason why this code is interesting is that if you pick certain parameters in this, in particular, let's say this d1 to dg, but then you make this g equal to 1, to one end it becomes what we know as Gabrielian code or the maximum rank distance code. But then there are these RIs here. If you pick those RIs all equal to 1, then it becomes a Reed-Solomon code. So it is like somehow a unifying family of Gabrielian and Reed-Solomon codes, which I have not seen before. So these are like new things. Okay. And these codes are achieve singleton bound with a certain different metric. Okay, like we have seen Hamming metric and rank metric. These are achieve the singleton bound for some rank metric. Okay. You can kind of guess why the sum rank is coming. You want to divide your code word into parts of these RIs. Okay, so that is kind of fixed. That partition is kind of given to you, and given that partition, you can define what is the sum rank, and this linearized Reed-Solomon codes achieve singleton bound with respect to sum rank metric. Okay, so all these properties are nice. The reason the linearized Reed-Solomon, I'll tell the construction and then maybe some closing remarks on this. Okay, the construction follows exactly like your Gabrielian code. Okay, I take this GR, K and GR minus K plus 1, linearized Reed-Solomon code over FQ, divide them into G groups of R symbols each. Okay, and encode each of them using an MDS code over FQ. Okay, the only difference is the first code that you are starting off with is a linearized Reed-Solomon code. It is not a Gabrielian code. Okay. So why was this latest development? The reason is the linearized Reed-Solomon codes can be designed over smaller field sizes as compared to Gabrielian codes. Okay, so the field sizes that you get, because there you are asking for linear independence of so many elements. Okay, here maybe you are not asking for that. That is the reason the field size reduces. So this is a closing remarks with respect to all the constructions. Okay. So one is, so we have seen two approaches. I have covered parity check matrix approach and these two ways of generator matrix approaches. And typically, when you take the generator matrix approach, the field sizes are higher if you assume asymptotically, which means when the length of the code is increasing. Okay, but then you are going to keep your number of parities in any either local codes or the global parities order of 1. Okay, maybe you are not increasing them with the length of the code. In that case, actually generator matrix based approaches are not so, means they have higher field sizes as compared to, it's always parity check matrix approaches which win. Okay, so now, but so here I have described in the parity check matrix approach something which is based on linearized polynomials. Okay, which you can see, they are related to this Gabrielian codes. The skew polynomials are polynomials defined over division rings. Okay, so they don't take coefficients from finite fields, they take over division rings. So which means actually they are non-commutative. Okay, so you have to define left multiplication and keep track of where you are multiplying and so on. Okay, but there have been recent works which use the skew polynomials in the parity check matrix approach to get local MRC constructions. Okay, and I mean all these new techniques are just to reduce the field size. I mean otherwise the Gabrielian codes linearized polynomials, they have quite high field sizes. Okay, so to reduce the field size, linearized Reed-Solomon codes was used in generator matrix approach, and skew polynomial based approaches are used in parity check matrix. And we are trying to do skew polynomial based approaches for hierarchical local MRC. So it seems like it's not direct extension. So there are things which need to be done. It's work in progress. Okay. So I think maybe, I mean, in the interest of time, maybe I will not go through the other topology. Maybe I will stop here and take questions. Okay, so because whatever I wanted to cover with respect to locality and hierarchical locality, that's done at this point. So maybe it's a good time to stop.
Thank you, Professor Lalita, for a wonderful talk. It was surely insightful and easy to comprehend. We can surely take a few more questions. Please feel free to ask.
So I had a minor question. When you are making these HY's independence, you used BCH codes, D minus 1, and at the other end of the spectrum you have Reed-Solomon codes, right? Where any K are linearly independent.
Yes.
But there's also BCH codes over intermediate fields that you could consider. So there's that gradation. Is it clear which offers the smallest field size?
So I think, so one thing is BCH codes. It has to. I think BCH codes give, but then okay. I see. Dependence of the certain codes.
Anyway, something to.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I have not done the comparison myself, but yeah, possibly. I mean, one quick answer is maybe, Reed Solomon, at least the cyclic paths are also can be thought of as BCH codes, maybe.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So,
All of them are BCH codes.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. So the parameters, I have to think about them more. I don't think I have a direct answer for that.
The other thing was that the construction by Shishang et al., the linearized Reed Solomon looks very interesting. It just seems like somehow there's a norm that's playing a role, right? You're taking the product of the conjugates, but you're not going all the way. So it's kind of like there's some norm somewhere.
Yes.
In the picture, right? I was wondering if that played a role.
Yeah, so I mean, so the sum rank thing, I think maybe it was natural for in the LRC kind of framework, okay, because many times that is the one that we are looking for, so maybe that's why it fits. But I don't know what was the precursor to it, because they have a whole lot of papers which is maybe outside the LRC literature itself, which do this maximum sum rank distance and their properties and so on. So I don't know what is the origin for that, but it somehow nicely fits the MRC. I mean the LRC property that we want, definitely. And more interesting thing is that it has both Gabardellin and Reed Solomon codes as subcases, which is again more interesting. About the properties of the metric itself, I have not gone through again in detail, but I think they are quite some interesting properties.
Okay. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any
the field size itself? Can you give me some numbers to indicate what the field size itself is, just to get an idea of
right. So it will be generally of the order of so if n is the length of the code, and let's say h is the number of global parities, and if I want to asymptotically think of field sizes, then it is I mean what is earlier known as n power h, but I think now they are able to bring it down to n power h over 2. So this is asymptotic. So I'm ignoring some constants. In asymptotics, typically the number of parities is assumed to be constant, either if it is local or global. But then dimension is increasing, and even the length of the code is increasing. So with all these kind of things, the field sizes, the recent things like let's say with this Q polynomial kind of constructions and so on, it is n to the h over 2. Okay, and there are lower bounds also. Okay, the field size, like I have mentioned in the start, lower bounds on field sizes are also known. Some of these constructions meet those lower bounds for certain parameters. It's not like none of these are universal that way.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions? So if not, then we will conclude for today evening. Thank you, Professor Lalitha, for joining us, and it was a wonderful talk. Just before we leave, I would request you guys to once again, subscribe to the Google Groups and also check out our website for notification on future talks. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.